Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made an impassioned plea for continued U.S. military support on Monday in a Washington speech. He's on his third visit to the U.S. and he warned that any failure to help Ukraine is fulfilling the Kremlin's dreams. Well, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has approved a $900 million payout for Ukraine. But will this impact U.S. ongoing debate over aid for Ukraine? The Republicans stand against it. What are Zelensky's chances of gaining aid for Ukraine? To discuss matters further, of course, we're being joined by Mr. Glenn Deason from Norway. Welcome on board, sir. All right. Sir, Mr. Deason, Zelensky said that politicians should not betray the soldier. And he said that drying up of U.S. aid was being cheered by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Do you feel U.S. is betraying the soldiers in Ukraine if it stops further aid?
Well, it could be seen as a betrayal because the word betraying the soldiers is interesting because the agreement between the United States and Ukraine was largely that the US would supply the weapons and Ukraine would supply the soldier. Keep in mind that already on the third day after Russia's invasion, the Ukrainians and Russians, they agreed to sit down and start negotiations. But this was then opposed by the US. And as we later learned from the mediators in those talks, which were then later both Israel and Turkey, they both said the same thing, that the US, well, with the UK, pressured Zelensky not to make peace with Russia, but instead to fight. And the way they were convinced, also confirmed in Ukrainian media, by the way, and former retired German general, was if you continue, if you fight the Russians, we'll give you all the weapons you need. We'll be with you till the end. This was the message. However, now we're reaching the point when the Ukrainians have sacrificed hundreds of thousands of their own soldiers, and the Americans no longer want to send weapons. So I guess I would agree that this would seem like a betrayal, because it is a betrayal.
Mr. Deason, now, of course, we spoke about this earlier as well, and, you know, the chances of fund coming in for Ukraine have been slim. Of course, the Republicans have been against it. They are demanding some kind of, negotiations on their end as well, which is internal to the US. But at the same time, there are other NATO nations as well which have opposed it, Hungary being, of course, a prime example of that. Now, the IMF has approved a $900 million payout for Ukraine. This happened just recently during this third visit of Zelensky's to the US. Do you feel this will impact US ongoing debate over aid for Ukraine? This will tilt it more in favor of Ukraine?
Well, that's almost a drop in the ocean compared to what the Ukrainians are asking for. Zelensky is asking for 60 billion, so which is a lot larger number. But I think it won't really make that big of a difference because they will still continue to hammer on with this. And of course, we're reaching a very critical point as well, simply because not only doesn't Ukraine have enough soldiers, it doesn't have enough weapons or ammunition either. So we're seeing now in real time the front lines seem to be collapsing. You know, soldiers are defecting, surrendering in increasing rates. And this is also creating tensions between the military and the political leadership. So maybe a lot of the people who resist funding Ukraine, it's based on the narrative that there's a stalemate, so there's no point. But I guess once they're seeing now that the Ukrainian army appears to almost be collapsing, and maybe some would not like for Russia to make any huge gains, this could be a motivation, because a key reason why they stopped sending weapons was because Ukraine couldn't make any advancements, take back territory from Russia. However, if Russia begins to take large swaths of territory, then perhaps this is something that would motivate the Americans to, again, intensify this proxy war and send some more weapons.
Mr. Deason, now, of course, that statement that you also repeated earlier, that we will fight with you and we will stand with you till the end. When they say till the end, is it till the end of Biden's term? Because what happens if Trump comes to power and the presidential polls are right around the corner? It's going to happen in 2024. His chances are very much there. It's not as if there is, it's a walkover for Biden. It's going to be a tough battle for him. What if Trump comes to power? Where does this go from there?
Well, first till the end is interesting because it's not defined what the end is, as you correctly say. It's the same argument that they're going to defeat Russia. No one defined what defeating the world's largest nuclear power would actually look like. So this is a key problem. If it was assumed that we'll take back all the territory, obviously this is not going to happen. But Trump, this is an interesting development. It depends if Ukraine can hold on for that long, because there's still a long time for the American election. But I guess that Trump would be, his presidency would be probably defined by uncertainty. In terms of the Ukrainian conflict, I guess Trump, he would want to be seen as strong, decisive, and feared. This could make him very unpredictable if he can't deliver this peace. He said he can bring peace in 24 hours. I guess he would want to do maximum pressure, which is his main method. On the other hand, he might also be a lot softer as well, because he doesn't seem very interested in focusing on the conflict with Russia. He sees the main threat as coming from China. And as he said many times, why do we even have NATO? The Soviet Union is gone. And, he's been taking the advice that we made some mistake in the 90s, probably, that we could have reformed the European system and made a peace with Russia instead of expanding this military bloc closer and closer to the Russian borders. So again, Trump is a wild card. He can either bring the situation out of control, or he can possibly help to bring it to an end. So it's hard to say. An unpredictable man, I would say.
You had mentioned earlier that, as far as the war is concerned, it's already over for Ukraine. Now, I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. If Ukraine is unable to get continuous support from the US, they've already mentioned that it is going to spell complete defeat for them if US does not continue giving aid to Ukraine. Also, it will be a betrayal of the soldiers as well. Where does Putin take this front line if Ukraine does not get continued support from the US? What's next after that? In case, we say Russia wins, what do they win?
Yeah, this is an equally good question, because if you would have gone back to February of 2022 or March, their main objective, again, as all the observers, mediators said, Russia would be willing to negotiate on everything except neutrality. They can't accept NATO on its borders. This is unacceptable. But again, at that point, NATO refuses to end its expansion. And this is something that NATO continues to say now. Once the war is over, we'll expand. But of course, this also manifested itself now in a territorial conflict, as Russia laid claim to several of the Ukrainian oblasts. So I think that without neutrality, Russia will simply make sure that Ukraine is not left with anything that NATO can use against it. So I would expect Russia would never go into Western Ukraine. This is they wouldn't be welcomed by anyone. This would be a fierce resistance. Also, they have nothing to do there. I think they would take back what was traditional, historical Russian territory. So everything from Kharkov to Odessa, which is where you find the main coastline, where the agriculture is, the main industries, the entire economy, for that sake, the natural resources. So this is seen as what the Americans and NATO might be interested in. So that's what Russia will probably take, so it can't be used against them in the future. So they will probably make a mess out of Ukraine, destabilize it, probably regime change. It's hard to say, but they would have to effectively ensure that Ukraine can never be used as a proxy against them. So again, this is why it's so dangerous and so destructive if there isn't a political settlement and this ends in total victory.
So just one last question. I want to get it very soon. Quickly, I want to slip this in. Russia already shares a border with Finland, and Finland has a longer border, adjoining border with Russia than Ukraine. Now, their NATO forces are very much there. What differentiates that from Ukraine? So what is the problem if Ukraine also becomes a NATO state when Finland is already one?
Well, Finland will become a problem in the future, but because this is the longest front line with NATO has with Russia now. But Ukraine is different for two reasons. One is the size of Ukraine. Finland is a small country. Ukraine has like 30 million people, and also it has the coast on the Black Sea. So cutting off, making that a front line against the Russians would cut them off the Black Sea. It would also put a huge military on its borders. Keep in mind what NATO did after 2014 when they toppled the government. They built up an army of hundreds of thousands of troops in Ukraine. They were modernizing the ports to accommodate American and British warships. They were effectively making it a very powerful base. You can't really do that with Finland. And second of all, within Ukraine, you have many millions of ethnic Russian speakers. If you're going to make Ukraine into an anti-Russian bulwark, all of those Russians would have to be very much oppressed in terms of cultural rights, political rights, and that's one of the things that Russia's been complaining about over the past 8 years. So Ukraine is really quite unique in that sense.
All right, Mr. Deason, we'll let you go for now. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing all your insights on this.
My pleasure.
Right.